even though he grew old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. Be a part of the show by calling 915-544-KTSM, 915-544-5876, or comment online on our stream at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. It's 4 p.m. Mountain Time, and that means it's time to talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thanks for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or Twitch, Andrew J. Polk. All of those places are to say that we're trying to be out there in a variety of ways in order to facilitate that conversation, even people just starting talking about what is going on, the issues that affect us here in the borderland, because no one else is going to talk about the way these things affect us than we are, frankly, because there's a lot of people that come out from outside of the area, and I'm always interested in how we are being talked about, but this kind of a 30,000-foot level approach to analyzing our issues misses so much of what actually goes on around here, and well, more than a little bit of agendas that sometimes come along with that, well, the issues we face may not exactly fit. So that's why we go and talk about the things that we do. So again, all of those ways you can tune in. We do appreciate those over on the social media. I like the interaction that comes with it, but this is not to say that we ignore or don't appreciate anyone else on there, even as Flaco Jimenez dropping that like over there, among others tuning in, chiming in over on the social media already. So again, if you're in your car, I would prefer you stick to the radio there if that's how you're doing it. Don't text and drive. We just had a bunch of those PSAs go by. So keep that in mind, particularly since April is Distracted Driving Month. Don't be that, is what I'm basically saying. Anyway, a bunch of things top of my mind here today, including some political updates. We have that simmering set of elections going on kind of in the background at this point. A lot of other stuff is taking precedence here, but a lot of it can be seen through the lens of what is coming up with that. So we've got some new-ish polling numbers coming out, revealing some things going on with the, of course, pending midterm runoff elections coming up a little bit later in May. And then, of course, the ever-present midterms elections coming up in November. Of those that are, well, still being looked at as some of the very top of ballot ones. One main one, of course, the governor's race. We'll be checking in on some of the polling there, plus some of the other runoff elections and the races that will then be setting up. So, whole lot more to look at there. Plus, just some other things that have been swirling around here that is might be a little bit more national in scope than we strictly get to, or international even, but directly related to what we see here in the area. Could the end of the, well, global order, or at least the bifurcation of the global economic system that we have seen previously, and there's a few hints at this, so this may be a little bit more speculative than we used to, but it's been renting space, well, rent-free in the back of my head for a while, so I figure we might as well talk about it a bit. Just some of the factors going into it, what might be coming in the next years or even decades, even as we have some historic votes happening on the international scale, and really how the efforts that we're seeing here in this region, including the nearshoring, farming, food efforts, all that kind of stuff plays directly into it. So we'll break all that down as well. And of course, our interview today is going to be talking about that whole Great Resignation issue and what the regional data actually shows is going on for our area in Texas and New Mexico on the state level. So we'll get into that as well. So a whole lot that we have going on in a lot of these arenas that we'll be getting into. So let's start off with that polling data, because again, I feel like we have been in the pursuit of all these other issues we get here, as Robert Haynes is also dropping the like over on the Facebook. Do appreciate it. So we talk about all these other issues, border security. I remember fondly, I feel like it was just a few weeks ago, but it feels like maybe more months here, that I said, like, man, I'm sure border issues will come back eventually, probably in the advent of the whole Ukrainian conflict. And, well, they've come roaring back with a shout, of course. But in the meantime, I feel like we've been neglecting some of the underlying political motivations in its own way, but really just the races themselves that are coming up here. Of course, we have the governor's race set up, matchup being pretty well determined here because, of course, both candidates for the Democrat and Republicans making their pretty handily their elections and avoiding runoffs. But there are still a number of top of ballot races that are still up in the air because there is still a lot of movement happening on the potential for who the combatants in the electoral sense anyway are going to be here. So two major polls I made brief mention of, but I really want to dig into here, coming from the Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation and the Texas Lyceum, getting some insight into how we're looking at as we are approaching. Let's start with November here, because of course that race that has been, whenever it comes up, pretty of interest to talk about locally, if only because of the characters involved in it. Of course, we have Texas Governor Greg Abbott handily winning his election for the primary and now moving on to the general election, and then of course former El Paso Congressman Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke handily, more than landslide territory, winning his primary as arguably one of the best known Democrats in Texas. It wasn't surprising to me that he was able to I think it was in the 90% range, if I'm not mistaken, winning his election. So according to the Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation, that potential going on to be race here for November, showing that Abbott's about 50% with O'Rourke about 42%. So about 8-point favor advantage for Abbott with about a margin of error of about 2.5% there. So outside the margin of error currently, which again may seem surprising for Texas anyway, because you go back half a decade ago and you would be hard pressed to find any other examples of even a shouting distance of Democrats to Republicans here within the state. But of course, things have changed and things continue to move on. And voter activation has actually been one of the kind of key factors that has been focused on by subsequent O'Rourke campaigns ever since basically the congressional seat that he held representing our area. And that has just continued on, though that 8% spread is also a different poll that came out start of April here from the Texas Lyceum with a margin of error of 2.83%, showing Abbott and O'Rourke within the margin of error of each other. Abbott at 42% in that case, and O'Rourke at 40%. So within the margin of error, and whether or not you believe that or not, again, some very different polling happening here, both in about the range of about 1,500 people polled for these different races here. So take it with a grain of salt here, because this is very early preliminary polling. Outside of the fact that these are well-known names, not a whole lot of focus happening on statewide when it comes to, these individuals currently and in this race. It's always in the background. I get so many texts and emails from both campaigns saying, hey, can you chip in for this? Hey, we're doing block walking. Can you help door knock? All of that. So it's kind of simmering in the background and comes up eventually. A lot more focus happening on what is happening in office for Governor Greg Abbott at the moment here, including those immigration efforts, border security efforts. More details coming out about his proposed busing of those that are found illegally crossing the border to D.C. for them to deal with, kind of thing here. The kerfuffles continue on. I promise I won't abuse that word here today, but more focus on some of the other races, because we're going to be voting on these a little bit sooner than not here in the primary election runoff. Of course, we've got in the lieutenant governor race here when it comes to, the Democrat side of it, Mike Collier being a pretty well ahead of the next closest there, Beckley there, when coming in second, of course, and then facing him in the runoff. Collier at 43%, Beckley at 31%, leaving a lot of, uncertain there. And then, of course, in the Texas Attorney General race, and that one on both sides of the ballot, still a bit of contention here, though some pulling away is happening here. Of course, we have previously interviewed the now chief contender to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, that of George P. Bush, the now former, if that's the way I think it works at the state level, once you're at this level of it, you have to have resigned, or if not, the most recent, shall we say, Texas Land Commissioner, going up against, again, Paxton, showing a little bit of a run behind at this point, with Paxton at about 65% and Bush at 23%. So not impossible, but we're very closely approaching, again, I believe it's May 24th, 25th, double check my dates here, that we are coming up on that primary runoff election. So there's a lot of ground to make up there if he's hoping, Bush that is, to have a successful challenge against Paxton. But again, we'll see what happens in the meantime. But then on the Attorney General for the Democrat side of things, we had Garza versus Jaworski, and Garza with about a 15% spread in their favor, 46% to Jaworski's 31%. Now, of course, these aren't all of the main races going to runoffs. We have mentioned previously those, that Republican ballot for the Texas Railroad Commission and commissioner, and, well, not part of this particular polling, but we'll check in on that when we can here, because another fascinating race, particularly if you're into pump jacks. Anyway, talk more about that coming up here. But of course, going into a lot of these in these races, phrase that I find persuasive is "it's the economy, stupid." So our interview coming up here after this break going to be about the Great Resignation, as it has been called, / the nobody wants to work anymore. But is that true? What are the actual trends going on a state-by-state basis? What does it look like here in our borderland region? And what kind of maybe lessons can be learned from it? But all that and more coming up after this break here on New Talk El Paso. You are tuned into us here on News Radio 690 KTSM, and I am your host. I'll open up those phone lines a little bit later. RJ saying Beto vote count versus Cruz was a wake-up call for Republicans. Definitely something to get to into there. But again, all that and more coming up after this break. More Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690. Stay tuned. As you are looking at your potential plans for the near term, anyway, I had some international travel I was looking at once we were, able to do so more freely again. And those plans may be a little bit on hold at the moment, but what doesn't have to be is you still getting the tastes from around the world, because there's actually a great local source for it. Enhanced Flavors is your local source for over 40 quality flavored olive oils, extra virgin olive oils, and balsamic vinegars. Their olive oils imported from Tunisia, Italy, Greece, and Spain, giving you a lot of great flavors from around the world, both in their extra virgin and flavored varieties. And of course, all of the balsamic vinegars are imported straight from the Modena province of Italy, as is required for it to be considered balsamic vinegar. Now, if you've never had good balsamic vinegar before, I got to encourage you to try this, because, I actually, my spouse, in fact, growing up said, I hated balsamic vinegar because, they'd only ever had the bad stuff. This is the stuff, the flavors they got out there, the combinations. I dare to even try it on a good quality ice cream, because that's when you get good quality balsamic vinegar. You can really help spice up your life and really enhance the flavors there. So if you want to find them and try them for yourself, they are out at Regional Farmers Market, most specifically the Upper Valley Farmers Market that happens Sundays in the Hobby Lobby parking lot near Doniphan and Mesa Crossroads area. Plus, you can find them online and find all about what they have and get it delivered straight to your door by going to enhancedflavors.com. That's enhancedflavors.com.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
We got a crash injury accident. Joe Battle Boulevard, northbound at Zaragoza. Take Montwood or Sunfire as alternates there. Border Highway, eastbound at Midway. A stalled vehicle is blocking the right shoulder. And Treywood Drive between Lomaland and Lee Trevino. At Jack Nicklaus Drive, an injury accident there with medical team on the scene. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by the Market Disruptors Live May 6th through May 8th in Dallas, Texas. In these uncertain times, it's never been more important to grow your wealth and protect your freedom. Learn how to do that and more with today's top experts at Market Disruptors Live, May 6th through the 8th in Dallas, Texas. Save your spot now at marketdisruptorslive.com.
He's one of America's most controversial billionaires, George Soros. All across America, Soros is funding far-left district attorneys for office. And once elected, these district attorneys oppose bail. They want early release for criminals. And in some cases, they won't even prosecute felony offenders. It's no wonder crime is spiking in major cities, and our police are under fire. Now, Rob Schmidt looks at the shocking situation on Newsmax. Tune into Newsmax and watch Rob Schmidt tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. And find out the real truth about George Soros and the dangerous district attorneys endangering our cities. You can find Newsmax on every major cable system. If your cable operator doesn't carry Newsmax, call them. Let them know you want it. Or watch Newsmax free on your smart TV. Or start streaming on Pluto, Zumo, Roku, and more. Millions are switching to Newsmax for news they can trust. Switch today and watch Rob Schmidt tonight.
The True Crime Podcast, What Happened to Sandy Beale, investigates the alarming death of a young woman who dreamed of a career in law enforcement. Journalist Melissa Jeltsin untangles the mystery at the heart of the investigation, revealing a troubling pattern by officials close to the case.
I didn't take any of their crap because I could tell that they were hiding something.
Listen to What Happened to Sandy Beale on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
It can be dangerously easy to steal your identity during tax season because so much sensitive info is all together. Before we start the annual meeting of Sean's personal info, has anyone seen Social Security number?
Not me.
Nope.
Nuh-uh.
Oh no, he's been stolen.
LifeLock by Norton makes it easy to help protect yourself. If you become a victim, we'll work to fix it. No one can monitor all transactions, but you can save up to 25% off your first year with promo code NEWS at LifeLock.com. Identity theft protection starts here.
If you see something, why do you say something?
I see safe for my friends.
For my community.
For everyone here. We all have something worth protecting, a why that unifies us. Report suspicious activity to local authorities. If you see something, say something.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. Your host, Andrew J. Polk here. A lot of stuff we're talking about here today. A lot of ways to interact with the show. Of course, we've got these social media pages, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, which you can chime in on or DM us if you really want to here. But, I mean, there's just the point is that we get the thoughts out there, set the table with a few issues here, and then I do want to hear from y'all because it's kind of the point here. Reason we don't just do this as a podcast is because the interaction, the back and forth, I find it very useful because I don't know everything. Never have said I would, but every day I realize I know less and less. But we'll keep delving into the issues and hopefully develop some kind of competency with getting into and discussing them. So getting into some right now, along with some of the other comments we got coming in. RJ again saying the Beto vote count versus Cruz was a wake-up call for Republicans. Something that has been talked about, again, one of the more specific regional statements that was said from the last time that Texas Governor Greg Abbott was in town doing his campaigning was about turning the border red from blue to red because the focus, I mean, he launched his campaign in the Rio Grande Valley and the visiting over here. So not much else specific local issues brought up outside of border security in general, which even then, most of the statewide efforts don't really have much, presence in our area when they're talking about blockading the Rio Grande. I mean, even with the water release scheduled for a little bit later in the year here, you still don't have to worry about much boat traffic in our region. Anyway, point is that that is something that we'll continue to discuss here. But another factor that will certainly be playing a part in these elections is the economy. I mean, this is something that Governor Greg Abbott has touted in his own campaign and in his time in his office. The idea that, we have this Texas economic miracle, essentially, if he doesn't say that exactly. Very much touting the idea that Texas is performing out and about more because of, some of the policies that are in place and some of his politics that he is therefore banking on to ride back into office. So what are some of the realities that we're looking at in the region? Because, of course, it's not as simple as, everyone's coming here, but really, what are the policies in place and what is it meaning for, all of the different organizations that are essentially trying to hold on to, employees, market share, all of that. So the Great Resignation, also sometimes referred to as no one wants to work anymore. What are some of the actual factors we're seeing in the state-by-state level? So I was able to talk a little bit earlier with an organization tracking these wallet hubs, talking with a couple times previously, and break it down, and here's what they had to say. Enjoy. Joining me now, we have Jill Gonzalez, analyst with Wallet Hub. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely here, because a lot of the analysis going on this year as we're looking at, both what the situation has been economically and in the job market over the last couple of years. And also, of course, looking forward, we are still seeing a lot of impacts from the, depending on how you put it, the Great Resignation or just the major shifts we're seeing in the job market. And you'll have some new data that you've come out with about what that actually looks like specifically around this region in Texas and New Mexico, right?
Yeah, as the economy has really started to recover from the effects of the pandemic, there's been a surge in job openings. So some employers actually are having a pretty difficult time filling all of their open positions. So because of that, new applicants have a lot of leverage right now. They have incentives available from changing jobs, maybe a desire to get away from careers, especially those impacted most by the pandemic. And those two things are really what's been driving the Great Resignation that we're seeing right now, with millions of Americans quitting their jobs each month.
I mean, if you look at some of the charts and graphs about the employment levels, the unemployment applications specifically is one of the more clear ones, because I mean, leading up to March, just over 2 years ago now, early to mid March of 2020, you saw unemployment, doing fairly well, and then that just reverse cliff, actually, because it just skyrockets. I mean, very rare you see such a vertical line of increase, as literally millions of people were, furloughed or eventually laid off in that kind of situation. So things, I mean, it was stark, that change here. And now, as things are trying to turn back on, as a lot of restrictions are down, consumer confidence is reaching new highs for recently, and people are wanting to do more, and businesses wanting to be able to do more of their business, trying to get people back. But you can't really just switch it back on from such an upheaval that happened with the job market. And that seems like it's being, as you're saying, reflected by individual employees and the decisions they're making for what they may have considered stable employment in the past. Their considerations of that are changing.
Exactly. So a lot of things going on here. Workers want to see things like higher wages. They want to see better benefits. They want more of a hybrid work environment where they're able to work remotely. Maybe if they want to go into the office, they can, but they're certainly, not forced to. So they're looking for a lot of different things than they were looking for in 2019, the beginning of 2020. A lot of things that they might not have even imagined that were doable now certainly are, and in fact, they're the norm.
So, nationally looking at first here, what are some of the differences you're seeing in states that have some of the highest resignation rates versus some that have the lowest?
Well, states with high job resignation rates are around anywhere from 3.5% to 4%. It might not seem like a lot, but these numbers kind of work like unemployment, which we haven't seen numbers that high for a long time here statewide. Normal numbers are more around 2%. So that would be something that we would have been seeing a few years back. So Alaska, for instance, right now is the state with the highest job resignation rate in the last year. It's at about 3.98%. So right under 4%. And I do expect that to reach the 4% level soon. So that's where we're seeing. And there's not necessarily regional trends. Alaska, we said, was number one here. South Carolina ranks second in terms of the highest job resignation rates right now. Georgia is third, Delaware fourth.
Interesting there. So in those trends, then where do Texas and New Mexico rank?
Texas and New Mexico are on either side of average. So Texas ranks 19th, which is a little bit higher than average, which isn't a good thing here. Its resignation rate just in the last month available was at about 3.1%. So that does rank in the top 15 just for the last month. So that is trending upward. New Mexico is doing a little bit better. It ranks 29th. So below average. Its resignation rate is at around 2.7%.
But then again, putting that in context of the standard resignation rates you might be able to see kind of across the country, about 2%, that means that, sure, we're looking at double that for places like Alaska or the other top of the list here. But even in Texas and New Mexico, we're looking at, 20 to 50% over what has been the norm, which, again, across all industries, all sectors, the entire state, that starts to add up.
Exactly. So Texas, I think we're going to see that number get a little bit worse before we see it get better. Whereas New Mexico, I do think that it is improving now.
Okay, and again, if you're just joining us, guest right now is Jill Gonzalez, analyst with Wallet Hub. You want to find out more information about this report they've got out or the work that they do, wallethub.com is the place to find that. But so specifically then, when we're looking at these differences between states, I mean, Texas has its own economic concerns, and of course, New Mexico on some trends here, including, of course, the beginning of legalized recreational marijuana sales and the implications that might come along with that. But I mean, those are some more recent factors. In general, what do you feel are, we've talked about some of the specific factors kind of nationwide. Are there any, in the state or in this region trends that can be identified from the numbers that you all are looking at?
Yeah, I mean, there's also just a decrease in the labor force participation that is affecting employers right now. And that spans across different industries, especially things like industries that rely more heavily on workers that are a bit older. Maybe they're in their 50s and 60s, like trucking, which is, hugely represented in this region. That's really been disproportionately affected by earlier retirement, which a lot of people looked into and did during the pandemic. We also see things like reduced opening hours in restaurants and in retail because employers are trying to use whatever existing workers they have more efficiently. So those are, a couple of things that are definitely at play within the region.
And another area that comes to mind there, we're talking about an older-ish on average workforce would also be teaching and public education. And that is something that we've seen interesting responses on either side of the state line here with New Mexico, having recently come out with their increase in base salaries and salary schedules. And Texas now probably going to be part of the campaign as a teacher or education task force being called for by Governor Greg Abbott. So, and I mean, the calls for even having to deploy National Guard in limited quantities and in specific circumstances to deal with the teacher shortage. So the whole impact on the labor force has been a one to kind of be concerned about. But is it mostly that it's people who were able to retire or at, within close enough gasp to it that they could reach out, grasp it, and take it, particularly with some of the, pandemic era in the immediate sense of the pandemic when it was at its height, able to take like certain, early retirement, those kind of things? Or are there other factors at play that are also seeing a reduction in the labor force, such as younger people dropping out of it, or is that really registering?
Yeah, absolutely. So there, on the older side of the workforce, we have people that decided to go the early retirement route, either during the pandemic or because of the pandemic. On the flip side, we see younger people wanting to shift careers entirely. I think that definitely affects things like teaching and the healthcare system. So you have people that, took that opportunity to take a leave from work to maybe go back to school or take online classes to now have a completely different career opportunity, one that does allow them to maybe work remotely or have better benefits, have better pay. So that's kind of on the flip side, what we're seeing happen to the younger side of the workforce. So really either end is affected here.
Interesting they put it that way here. But so on those then pay, wage, and benefits, including remote work situations, how are those seeming to affect, at least on a state by state basis? I mean, remote work there's still plenty of kinds of work that can't be done remotely, anything in most of the service sector industries. But once you get above it and beyond that, when you start looking at higher levels of weights and wages, how does the availability on a state basis of remote work end up affecting, these rates of resignations?
Yeah, I mean, different states just have different economies. And what we're seeing here, especially in this report, is that there's a greater increase in quit rates in states where there are fewer remote work options. So that they have lower unemployment rates as well. And that means that there are just more options for workers to move to jobs that are more attractive to them. And in some cases, that might mean moving states as well.
So yeah, that concept of moving states here, I'm aware of a few people just in my own life and extended friends and relationships that have said, yeah, we were in a location and we've now moved to frankly a more isolated one, but one that offers certain benefits and cost of living while still doing the otherwise same kind of work they were doing in a much in-person, higher cost area. Is that a trend that y'all looking at this in the data here, you expect to continue this kind of resignation and kind of complementary migration in its own sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a report that we follow up on monthly to see, what is trending, which states are moving up or down here. So that's something that we can definitely start to track each month.
Absolutely here. Again, a guest right now has been Jill Gonzalez, analyst with Wallet Hub. Again, you want to see that current study they've got out right now about, well, the 2022's states with the highest job resignation rates. You can find it again, wallethub.com. So, Jill, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us about this study and what the impacts people might be feeling or need to understand from it are here today.
Anytime.
All right, that's going to take us through our next break right now. So coming out of the break, we'll talk more about this and some of the other factors, including what some of the, well, local trends and issues we've been talking about affecting us here in the borderland are going to mean for a potential, well, shifting of some of the global economic order. I know that may seem like a fairly large bound to make, but stick with me. I'll explain it as best I can. The factors I'm looking at here coming out of this break. More Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hey everyone, it's your KFOX 14 News Update. I'm Robert Olguin. El Paso Congresswoman Veronica Escobar is celebrating the appointment of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. Today, the Senate voted 53-47 to confirm President Biden's pick to the Supreme Court. Escobar released a statement saying that Jackson is a talented and brilliant jurist who will make an excellent addition to the Supreme Court. The El Paso Museum of History has been named as one of 30 finalists for the 2022 National Medal for Museum and Library Service. The El Paso Museum of History is one of 2 institutions in Texas to be selected as a finalist for that award. According to the city, the National Medal is the nation's highest honor given to museums and libraries that demonstrate a significant impact on their communities. This has been your KFOX 14 News Update. I'm Robert Olguin.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
Checking El Paso traffic, watch for a truck with a stalled, oversized load blocking the right lane, Gateway Boulevard, southbound at Fred Wilson. Another stalled vehicle on Border Highway eastbound at Midway blocking the right shoulder. I-10 eastbound from Piedra Street to past the Patriot Freeway. It's slow with 5-minute delays. And an injury accident Treywood Drive between Loma Land and Lee Trevino. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
In Severe Weather Center, this is Chief Meteorologist Sandra Diaz. Well, we had our cold front come through in the morning, and that left us with a cooler day, but now it leaves us with another cool night. But the winds should be much nicer tonight. So overnight temperatures will drop into the lower to mid 40s. We are looking at a gorgeous day on Friday with temperature highs much closer to normal in the mid to upper 70s. This weekend, though, we will see bigger changes with increasing winds as well as increasing temperatures.
This report is sponsored by the Our American Stories podcast.
There's a man in Australia who came to America only to fall in love with a great American culinary experience, buffalo wings. Be sure to listen to this week's edition of Our American Stories on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, spring is here, and the warmer weather means you've got a lot more going on. Don't let COVID get in the way of any of it. COVID vaccines offer the strongest possible protection now and from long-term effects in the future. Protect yourself and your plans. We can do this. Find vaccines near you at vaccines.gov. That's vaccines.gov. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
For local issues and discussion you won't get anywhere else, turn to Talk El Paso. Weekdays at 4 right here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Brought to you in part by the El Paso Community Foundation. Sound off on what matters to you. Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. And let's talk El Paso.
There's a man in Australia who came to America only to fall in love with a great American culinary experience, buffalo wings. Be sure to listen to this week's edition of Our American Stories on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This report is sponsored by the Our American Stories podcast.
I adopted Bento in 2010 from a shelter. A lot of people know him as Keyboard Cat.
That's just one adoption story that started at a shelter. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
We're here talking to one of the fastest growing invasive species in Texas. Hi, I'm Giant Salvinia, nasty invasive species. I double in size every week. I understand you destroy Texas lakes and ruin fishing. Oh, yeah, that's my thing. And that would be why boaters, fishermen, and skiers hate you. Yep, but they do give me rides from lake to lake. Folks, Giant Salvinia clings to boats, trailers, and gear. So remove even the smallest piece and put it in the trash. Don't tell them that! Hello, Giant Salvinia. Goodbye, Texas lakes. A message from Texas Parks and Wildlife.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thanks for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or Twitch, Andrew J. Polk. Few people tuning in and chiming in over there, as we got RJ, John Brownson, Calvin Williams. Good afternoon to you as well. And RJ asking specifically, am I talking about the World Government Summit calling for digital currency to track every transaction? Yes and no. I almost am wondering if that's going to happen in such a way. I know there's been concerns for years about, major control. I mean, globalization has come with, a lot of baggage on it, frankly, here. Then some other comments. So we'll get into that here in just a second. Some other comments coming in here. John Browse has been saying a little bit earlier that newly arrived liberals need to leave their blue state voting back in California and other blue states. You've already destroyed the best state in the nation. Leave Texas alone. I've seen some very similar type sentiments around here. Don't California my Texas, or make sure you know where you're moving in Texas, and then showing a map of, like, say, Oklahoma with just the city names replaced. El Paso ends up somewhere in the Panhandle, I think, in that kind of interpretation. But I mean, there's a lot of movement. I mean, it kind of goes off of the conversation we had yesterday with a local realtor, Patrick Tuttle, about what we're seeing, the impetus and the cost and the demand for housing in our area. So it's not unreasonable to expect that there is that kind of movement happening to our area. But when I'm talking about what might be going on with the World Economic Order, I know that may be a phrase that has some baggage to it here. And this is not any one specific thing I can point to, really. Calvin Williams saying Texas is the best state in the nation. I will agree with you there. In general, there's a lot of reasons I live here and not, California, Arizona, or other places here. Will freely admit and say that here. So let me just lay out a couple of factors that I'm looking at to kind of explain my thought process on this. Of course, we had today one of the frankly biggest rifts happening in terms of the global order, or the way the order has existed, primarily coming out of World War II, and then even further on, ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall, where the UN has now suspended Russia from the UN Human Rights Council, and then, Russian representatives saying that, just screw you, we quit kind of thing. And so that happening, I mean, that is one of the biggest rifts that has happened, again, since the Soviet Union. Even then, the Soviet Union would kind of play ball, at least in terms of the UN previously, and invariably not. I mean, there were more than a few kerfuffles there as well. Again, it's only the second time I've used it this hour, so don't come at me about that. But seriously, when you think about it, the Russia being kicked out of it, I mean, the UN has been, in my perspective, kind of a feckless body for a long time. I mean, heck, even on the Security Council, the condemnation that happened right up until Russia, which is a permanent and vetoing member, said, no, we're not going to do that. I mean, China also participated. But, I mean, you look at that kind of an issue, this is not the kind of stark and serious action that the UN usually takes when we're talking about, serious consequences. Because even when there are, at least when major powers are involved, I mean, the UN's primary aspects that you can really point to has been in, places where there aren't major powers, or at least not present in that region, such as, Africa, some parts of Southeast Asia, those kind of places where you're not actually dealing with one of the major powers, which is why they still haven't been loath to really step into this whole Ukrainian conflict. But, this is the first real kind of move we've seen along with that. So what would the consequences be if Russia were to really pull out entirely of these international agreements, these international bodies that they had been willing to play the game with previously? Think about it. I mean, and of course, even beyond that, there's the idea of how will China react. There's been some talk about essentially cooperation and maybe a realignment between Russia and China. I'm still not convinced that that is totally possible. Economic cooperation, sure, but there's a reason that even in the height of the communist power within that, even that hemisphere, there was still a little bit of tension between the Soviet Union and the Communist Party of China. Just didn't quite get along, and my hill, stay away from it kind of thing here. But it also comes up to another idea that was floated recently in the last couple of months, again, since the advent of the Ukraine conflict, and that is the idea of peaceful coexistence, essentially a Soviet-era policy that said that, it set up the Cold War effectively, but it's essentially kept the whole Bolshevik mentality from carrying over into every interaction that happened on the global scale, because arguably the entire inciting incidents for the Russian Revolution would have made the ability to allow for any capitalist state to still exist impossible. But being and wanting to keep in power as they were, the powers that be within the Soviet Union said, okay, well, we're still going to compete with you probably a lot, and more than a few proxy wars ended up happening, but we will have this idea of peaceful coexistence. The idea that we'll do our own thing, you do your own thing, as long as you're not directly opposing us, we'll let bygones be. Again, it's a concept that didn't necessarily totally bear out in reality, but still, that has once again been floated as an idea. So that is already one aspect of a fracturing of an order. But then another, again, very recent event ongoing actually at the moment, China doing one of the most dire warnings they have put out recently, saying that they will, quote unquote, take strong measures, end quote, if House Speaker Nancy Pelosi ends up going to Taiwan as part of a Asian trip that she was at least scheduled for, even though I haven't seen any impact from this necessarily just yet, but she has actually tested positive for COVID, as if you want to find that over on our website right now, ktsmradio.com. So whether that trip will totally be on or not, the response is still very telling, where China basically saying that do not interfere in our internal politics, because, of course, the Communist Party of China regards Taiwan as within the state of China, and technically official policy of the United States ever since, you go back to the opening of relations with China under Nixon, has been the one China policy, and therefore referring to it not as the Republic of China and then the Communist Party of China. It's all considered territory, except of course for the major arms sales we do to China. So this is getting pretty much international relations here and a little bit further afield from what it is. But what would that mean if this becomes, well, maybe it doesn't go totally a hot war, but these currents continue? Because we have already seen, China has been pursuing a policy for years, decades even now, probably longer if you really want to go to it, of essentially undermining what they see as the hegemonic control of the United States over the global world order. Now, from our perspective, might be saying that not everyone does what we say. What are you even talking about? But still, essentially, they want to supplant and, have their own sphere of influence. So if we were to get closer to that, this idea of spheres of influence and essentially regional control, more or less hemispheric control, if we're really considering the influence of China and Russia as being not one global economic order. The entire idea of globalization has previously been that you can get anything from anyone, anywhere, and source it, and all, again, efficiency and cost and low cost really being the only drivers of this. But, well, we're already seeing a little bit of that impact here. We're seeing some currents we've talked about with the whole nearshoring or even close reshoring that we're seeing within our region, the whole real demand that's been going on in the maquila industry for years now, actually. Slight dip with the pandemic and the advent of the shutdowns and closures that came with it, but has roared back strong already surpassing by some estimates the levels we were at in, say, 2019 as of now. So it's back. There's no mistaking that. And even more companies and interests of reshoring, nearshoring, all of that coming into this region. So what does that mean and do with this if we are looking at not a global supply chain anymore because there's more, regional production? Does that even make it more possible for this kind of bifurcation, this separation of the economic order of the world being made even faster? Because sure, we saw essentially in the start of the trade war that we saw under the Trump administration, the embargoes or the tariffs that were put on back and forth and the retaliatory ones. That was kind of, you can put it kind of in hindsight as maybe the first shots of this future conflict that could be coming. Again, I use conflict in the terms of just opposing forces, not necessarily literal physical violence, but you got to admit that, it's been going on for a while now, of opposition to certain levels of control and essentially, particularly in the part of the Chinese, wanting their own control here. Now, of course, this can come into conflict. You can writ this a little bit more large with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, essentially the way that they're saying it and even blaming it outright sometimes about Western influence and wanting to have their own sphere. If these trends continue, and again, to bring it home here, we are looking at potential big upheavals. Regional reporting coming out from across the country here about food supply concerns from local farmers amid fertilizer prices continuing to soar or even be unavailable of stocks in some ways. Now, these are not insurmountable issues here, but really, if we're looking at, again, because Russia and China have essentially said, no exports happening here, those could very easily be seen in coming years as some of the first major steps in a complete separation of this order. And essentially, even further on, if we want to get real national about it, impacts to, say, the currency, the world currency reserve status of the United States dollar that has really helped enforce U.S. policy and desires around the world for the last, let's call it, half century. So with those kind of things happening, and essentially a removal of the idea of globalization as the norm, these multinational companies sourcing things from every corner of the world, to being more of a, you got to do it within your sphere, within your corner, or you're dealing with a completely separate, different set of rules and those in charge here. That could be the order we're looking at. So these are some of the thoughts that I've been wondering about. And again, the impacts locally and the way it may even play into that can be seen very clearly, because the idea of this, again, reshoring that we're getting in our area, and that we are, seeing the trends of, we've got other investments happening on this side of the border, on the Mexican, and even in the Chihuahua City corridor, as Juarez as well. All of that may actually help to accelerate this process and create even more, stability within this aspect of the system, as we even see a complete split into 2, maybe even 3 different sectors, depending on essentially how well China and Russia play together, which, if they end up getting their way, might not be that very well, because, they cry out against the idea of imperialism and global hegemony, but that essentially, in their eyes, just because they want to have their own in place and no one else's. So those are some of the currents that I'm looking at, amongst other things, kind of long-term impacts. But again, the impacts that we see in our borderland region are, pretty obvious when you start looking at it a little bit further here. So that's a lot of ways to say that I think things are going to continue being an upheaval for a while. And I think that local aspects of it here will continue to be a major factor in determining how it turns out, and frankly, how our region ends up enduring all of this here. That's going to take us through our next break here. Coming out of the break, tell you what, as this point in the show, we usually do it anyway. We'll go ahead and open up those phone lines. Again, that number to call, as usual, 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
Checking El Paso traffic. Watch for a truck with a stalled, oversized load blocking the right lane, Gateway Boulevard, southbound at Fred Wilson. Another stalled vehicle on Border Highway, eastbound at Midway, blocking the right shoulder. I-10 eastbound from Piedra Street to past the Patriot Freeway. It's slow with 5-minute delays. And an injury accident, Treywood Drive, between Loma Land and Lee Trevino. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by the Our American Stories podcast.
There's a man in Georgia who owns a burrito shop. When his store was broken into late one night, he posted his personal number and a job offer online for the would-be thief. Be sure to listen to this week's edition of Our American Stories on the iHeartRadio app, and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Katherine Townsend, host of the true crime podcast Hell and Gone. In October 2015, 18-year-old Ebby Stepwick vanished without a trace.
And then the fact that they found her phone in her car, her wallet, her keys in her car, that right there tells me someone planned this.
I'm back in Arkansas, investigating what really happened to her. iHeartRadio is #1 for podcasts, and it's easy to see why. Listen to Hell and Gone on the iHeartRadio app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's the sale worth shooting for. The Casa Buick GMC Slam Dunk Sales Event.
Casa Buick GMC, the #1 used car dealer, is fast breaking their top-ranked Buick and SUV lineup straight to your driveway.
2022 Buick Encore will be sold at the lowest advertised prices of the year. That's $24,777 or $325 per month.
And finally, we have 2022 GMC Sierras with 0% APR or immediate delivery.
The Casa Buick GMC Slam Dunk Sales Event.
Swish!
Casa Buick GMC, next to the airport, Montana at Airway.
Maybe you've had to put off a health appointment or two during the COVID-19 pandemic. But if you're 45 or older, there's one test you shouldn't put off any longer: regular screening for colorectal cancer. Colorectal cancer is a leading cancer killer, but it can be prevented with regular screening starting at 45. There are more screening options than ever before, including at-home tests. It takes guts to put your health first. Ask your doctor about your options today. Visit cdc.gov/screen4life for more information.
Hi, Phil Swift here. When that next storm is barreling down, get prepared with the Flex Seal family of products. Floods can destroy your home. Push Flex base deep into cracks and holes to help prevent flooding. Seal doors and windows, patch leaky roofs and downspouts. Remember, when that storm is coming your way, keep your family safe and dry. Be prepared with the Flex Seal family of products. Available at flexsealproducts.com and fine retailers.
There's a man in Georgia who owns a burrito shop. When his store was broken into late one night, he posted his personal number and a job offer online for the would-be thief. Be sure to listen to this week's edition of Our American Stories on the iHeartRadio app, and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. A lot of ways to participate in the show. Tune in, chime in, do all that good stuff here. Of course, we got the social media. A lot of comments coming in there. We got the phone lines open right now. That number to call, 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. I will do that throughout the next hour as well. So if you end up, we got a short-ish segment here, so I'm going to have to end up taking that next break here. So in that effort, let's get straight to at least one phone call here for this hour on the line. Right now, we do have Jerry on the northwest side here. Jerry, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for taking my call. Just along that lines that you were speaking about, the Russian foreign minister, and I don't remember his name.
Lavrov, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Okay, not only is it Russia and China, and you've got Iran in there. India is also favoring towards Russia. Then you'll have some even on the Western Hemisphere, like Argentina and even Mexico. Not to mention, I forgot the other one that was down there on the South America.
I mean, there's
Nicaragua
a number of them,
was
yeah.
one of them. But they're all in like an Axis power, and they're tired of the U.S. being the big dog on the porch, basically. So
that's a decent short form way to put it here. I think one concrete way to kind of go along with the sentiment you're expressing there, that there is the BRICS form, BRICS, which stands for, well, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and or actually I'm going to look it up. Actually, the members are now that I think about it, but yeah, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And there have been some, overtures for other countries such as Mexico, Colombia, like you've been mentioning there, to be a part of it, as essentially not like a third world alliance, but opposition to things like NATO and all of the U.S.'s alliances here. So those have been emerging and been in place for years. Actually, I want to say that that's been around by at least 2001 in some form or other, even just conceptually. But the bonds between those countries specifically has been growing, definitely.
yes, sir, and that's one of the things that's going on with this new world order that they're talking about, and the Build Back Better plan that they have. It's all works together for them to bring down the United States. They don't understand. A lot of Americans don't understand that a couple of our past presidents have been selling out the United States for a long time. So, it started like in the 1990s. And you know who was in charge in the 1990s as president?
Yep.
So that's my 2 cents worth.
No, I appreciate
Thank you, sir.
No, absolutely. Thank you for the point in the call there. I mean, tell you, we'll have to get into more of this here next hour because we're running short of time for this hour. But again, if you want to call and add your 2 cents, 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. Get into this and some other subjects that RJ and others are bringing up here. But all this is to say we got a lot more impacts going on here in the borderland. So we'll delve into it further. Again, the number to call if you want to chime in, 915-544-5876. 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break in the top of the hour news with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
On Loop 375 southbound between Zaragoza back to Padres, you got slow traffic, heavy congestion, and delays. On the I-10 westbound between Ressler and Thorne, it's slow with 5-minute delays. Watch for a stalled vehicle border highway eastbound at Midway. And an accident reported Edgemere Boulevard eastbound at Tierra Este. Use Pebble Hills as an alternate there. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
The El Paso Community Foundation supports the causes you feel passionate about here in the borderland, whether it's education, social services, arts and culture, the environment, health, or economic development. The El Paso Community Foundation has been promoting philanthropy and progress in our hometown region for more than 45 years. Make your mark with us. Start a fund today for good, for El Paso, forever. Learn more at epcf.org. That's epcf.org.
There's something for everyone on Discovery Plus. The streaming home of ghostly freakouts, muscle car spinouts, and 90-day makeouts.
I'm really in love with her.
Start your free trial today for exclusive originals and a huge collection of favorites.
Whoa!
Then dive into Nature Docs, geek out with the family, and get your grub on. I can eat this every day. The streaming home of true crime, paranormal, food, home, nature, romance, plus so much more. Discovery Plus. Start your free trial. Terms apply.
Freedom of speech lives here.
To me, freedom of speech is being able to say anything you want.
El Paso's News Radio, 690 KTSM. News on the hour and a half. Traffic and weather all day. News Radio 690 is KTSM AM El Paso, an iHeart radio station.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. It'll be a while before Ketanji Brown Jackson is sworn in as a U.S. Supreme Court Justice. Lisa Taylor explains.
It won't come until Justice Stephen Breyer retires at the end of the court's current term this summer. Jackson was confirmed by the Senate on a vote of 53 to 47. Democrats are taking a victory lap after the Senate's confirmation of Brown Jackson. She'll be the first Black woman to ever serve on the high court.
Today, the higher angels, as Abraham Lincoln said, held forth.
During a Capitol News briefing, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called it an amazing day and said Democrats are elated. He stressed her confirmation is part of a long, hard road to greater equality and less bigotry in the U.S.
At least 2 people are dead in a shooting attack in one of Israel's main cities. Police are hunting for the gunman. Reports say shots rang out in several locations of Dizengoff Street in the center of Tel Aviv. The Jerusalem Post says several other people are hurt. Following 2 straight days of losses, stocks are closing higher. At the closing bell, the Dow Jones rose by 87 points to 35,583. President Biden's sister has COVID-19. Valerie Biden Owens tested positive for the virus on Wednesday. Her publishing company, Celadon Books, released a statement today saying she wasn't in close contact with the president or the first lady prior to her positive test. Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson toured the town of Springdale today, a week after an EF3 tornado brought widespread damage to the community. Despite the losses, the governor says it wasn't enough to qualify for federal assistance.
I think the consensus is we're not going to meet a federal threshold for damages.
The governor is hoping the damage will qualify for state assistance, but even if it does, he says it won't be enough to help restore everyone's losses. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio. China is no longer the dominant source of the deadly opioid fentanyl.
Since the People's Republic of China scheduled fentanyl-related substances, U.S. law enforcement now assesses most fentanyl seized in the United States is manufactured in Mexico.
That's State Department Assistant Secretary James Walsh. The fentanyl is flooding across the border into the U.S. He told a congressional panel that it'll take work on both sides of the border to stop the flow. I'm Dina Kodiak.
Tropical weather experts at Colorado State University are predicting another above-average Atlantic hurricane season. CSU forecasters are calling for 19 named storms this year, with 9 becoming hurricanes. Of those, 4 could become major storms of Category 3 or higher. According to CSU, the Atlantic season has averaged 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes over the past 30 years. Many New York State court employees now face termination over COVID vaccine requirements. Liz Warner has more.
Last month, 156 court workers were notified if they didn't furnish proof of vaccination by April 4th, they could be fired, with the court system now sending termination letters out to over 100 people. Judge Jenny Rivera sits on the state's Court of Appeals. She's one of 4 New York judges referred to the Commission on Judicial Conduct over noncompliance. While she can't be fired by the system like the others, the commission does have the power to remove her from the bench. She's already been barred from court facilities and has been working via video.
Some of Betty White's items are going up for auction. Several of her items are going on a worldwide tour and then will be sold with the help of Julian's Auctions in Beverly Hills, California later this year. Things such as scripts, jewelry, clothing, and more will hit the auction block on September 23rd through the 25th. Highlights include White's director chair from her time on Golden Girls, her Screen Actors Guild Lifetime Achievement Award, and her gold leaf-designed wedding band. Brian Shook, NBC News Radio.
This report is sponsored by Liberty Mutual Insurance, where you only pay for what you need.
Liberty. Nobody should have to pay for one-size-fits-all insurance coverage. Liberty Mutual customizes your car and home insurance so you only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Anyone can get long COVID.
even Caitlin, age 20.
I got COVID in November 2020. In January, I started having long-term problems. I was a varsity soccer player in high school, and now I get winded just from walking. I can't remember things. It's just unbearable.
Getting vaccinated against COVID-19 is the best way to prevent long COVID. Find vaccines near you at vaccines.gov. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
iHeartRadio wants you to see the Who Hits Back tour in the U.S. city of your choice. We don't get fooled again. We'll fly you there, take care of the hotel, get you 2 premium tickets to the show, plus the Baba O'Reilly VIP package. That includes too many things to mention, but trust us, it's amazing. For your chance to win, just open the free iHeartRadio app and listen to the Who Radio. Tickets to the Who Hits Back tour on sale now at livenation.com. See the Who in the city of your choice from iHeartRadio.
Me, a cat, moving in with a new human. It took a little getting used to. She has these weird games she likes to play, like this giant feather. She sticks it in my face. I swat it away. She sticks it in my face. I swat it away. It's almost like she thinks I enjoy it. But seeing how much fun she gets out of it, well, I guess it makes it all worth it. Humans.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Why should you volunteer with Meals on Wheels?
I never thought that 5 minutes could make so much difference in the lives of 2 people, but it has.
Drop off a warm meal and get more than you expect. Volunteer at AmericaLet'sDoLunch.org. Brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or Twitch, Andrew J. Polk. A lot of stuff we're talking about here today, including regional job markets, what the impacts there are, some of those polling numbers, and of course, more than a little bit of what some of the currents we're seeing in terms of reinvestment, nearshoring, actual reshoring happening right within our region actually means for, some of the global currents we're seeing. Could the essentially economic order that had existed ever since World War II and accelerated by the fall of the Soviet Union be, already seeing more of a split than we've seen within generations? My generation. Anyway, at this point, but we also have those phone lines open right now. The number to call there, 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. A lot of comments coming in here. RJ, Calvin Williams, John Brazelton, James Radcliffe, Maria Coleman, and more. Some of the comments coming in here Calvin Williams saying, Texas is so great, we will provide free transportation to the nation's capital for free for some people, referring there to, at least in part, the Texas Governor Greg Abbott's assertion that he is going to essentially bus those arrested at the border and facing deportation, among other things, to D.C. to let them deal with it here, though he has come out further and saying that this will be a voluntary program, I believe is the way it's being put here. So we'll see. Again, a lot of questions were immediately brought up about that, about how is that actually going to work here? But again, he was saying more providing it to local officials if they want to. So maybe trying to avoid the legal challenges that are pretty guaranteed to come along with this, but that's still a developing story there. Here, John Brazelton referring to other national events here. Hopefully Justice Jackson will be in the Supreme Court minority for many years to come. One of her duties as the junior member of the court is to decide on the lunch menu. Hope every justice on the court has a food taster. Interesting point to be made there. Again, I hope a long terms and long life and service to any one of our very dedicated public service officials. That's all I'm going to say about that. Just saying, whenever you start bringing up judges and other events happening to them, it goes really weird, really fast here. James Radcliffe saying, it's funny that the Kremlin refuses phone calls from the woke generals from the Pentagon. Maybe they don't want to listen to a globalist like Milley and Austin. Calvin Williams furthering on with that, saying, I'm sure that Milley has called his counterpart and assured them they will not be taking sides, referring to some of the recent, in the last administration anyway, events that had happened here. RJ saying that globalists declare that this is China's century, and if you look at the collapse of the dollar in America, they're making progress here. again, I think there's going to be attempts here, but really, if we see this complete splitting of the global order, going to kind of put a wrench in any avowed globalist plans here. But on a lighter note, RJ also saying, I just learned that it's National Beer Day. Let's get on with the show. I want a hangover tomorrow here. If you're popping one, feel free to. I know that some out there are already talking about it. And finally, Maria comment with a longer comment that I think totally appears on screen here. The future and power of NATO was already questionable prior to the current conflict. Globalization has resulted in dependencies on China. The pandemic revealed that medications and medical supplies were no longer manufactured in America. Very true there. Aligning with surrounding countries may be a positive venture. Less transit time, less pollution, may also curtail illegal migrants and provide manufacturing jobs in the region here. So, I mean, when you're talking about such an upheaval of a system that has been in place, I mean, I really want to say, kind of in a hindsight way and without taking into consideration how things may turn out here if this trajectory were to continue. You may even look at as like NAFTA, the original NAFTA, as kind of a high water mark of that here. Edgar RT is also chiming in here, been working real hard, but on board with us now here. Welcome to be and welcome back to the show here if you're tuning in there that way. But again, we got those phone lines to get to. Again, the number to call there, 915-544-5876. 915-544-KTSM. We do have Raul in the Northeast on the line here right now. Raul, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andrew. Well, the country took a step forward today because of President Biden and the Democratic Congresses that just appointed the first black woman, this Ketanji Brown Jackson, as a Supreme Court justice, and who, by the way, is the only justice who has ever been a public defender and who is much more qualified than any of the sitting justices. And today, President Biden said, Judge Jackson's confirmation was a historic moment. We have taken another step toward making our highest court reflect the diversity of America. She will be an incredible justice, and I was honored to share this moment with her. Now, it's interesting to note that only 3 Republicans voted for her. Surprise, surprise, huh? In the self-proclaimed Big Tent Party, there are only 3 black Republican congresspersons, 2 in the House and 1 in the Senate. And they all went along with Donald Trump's racist Obama birther conspiracy, which jeopardized Obama's life and that of his family. You know, threats against the presidency tripled when Obama became president, according to the Secret Service. And threats against members of Congress has also ballooned since Trump days.
I mean, you're right on that last point here, and that is notably across the aisle here. I'm having trouble connecting any birtherism sentiments to this current political issue you're talking about here on the confirmation of soon to be sworn in before too long, at least from the news report at the top of the hour, Ketanji Jackson. Not quite getting that there because at least in terms of the actual confirmation hearings, the major points were made on were actually part of her record, mostly on seeming or at least identified by some leniency to some. So having a hard time connecting that there to any currents of even before the previous administration.
Well, they tried to bring up critical race theory and, this whole idea that Republicans want to move the country backwards with its revanchism and delusionally wanting to return to a mythical time when America was great. You know, here's some critical race theory for you. America has never been great for all Americans and probably for most Americans. And it wasn't all that great, but for the capitalist WASP men who founded the country. And it certainly wasn't great for the Native Americans who suffered genocide, loss of their lands and way of life to an invading Western Europeans who considered themselves racially superior. Now, they did have the advantage of developing some science, and they had steel, guns, and germs. America also wasn't great for the blacks. The unregulated capitalism that was permitted by the new country's government, a government founded by plutocrats who were anti-democracy, thus the Electoral College and the Senate. America wasn't all that great for women who got the vote almost 50 years after black men got the vote. America hasn't been all that great for working Americans either. Prior to World War II, most Americans worked all their lives to retire in poverty. America has taken, and what's really frustrating is America has all it takes to make utopia an American reality rather than just the American dream. But the plutocrats, unfortunately, can buy enough politicians to get their way. America is suffering through several crises, global climate change, the pandemic, and a deeply divided country and a very dysfunctional government, which we saw how the Republicans walked out of the Senate chambers after the new judge was appointed. So we know where they're coming from.
I mean, you bring up a lot of interesting points there. Again, not quite getting the connection you're making between, again, the whole birtherism movement and the confirmation of this judge. I mean, I want to say that Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell basically said that concerns about her record are the main reason that he was deciding not to vote in favor of her confirmation in the whole, express consent way that the Senate is supposed to consider these things and judicial activism. So at least the public statements being made on this firmly focused on her record and such. And I have long thought that there is no subset of the American population, any racial, ethnic, or even essentially regional bounds that would make it that there is not a qualified person found within that would not be, able to hold such an office here. Even if the way that the Biden administration avowed, I mean, they went about this totally politically, saying that, we need to have a specific type of person on the court here. And that just, it kind of irked me because you want the most qualified people into it. And if they just happen to find one of a set that then meets their political goals, well, so be it. But I mean, person will be, of course, now confirmed to the court here and probably in place for years to come as such things go here. But to the idea of that America was never great, this is the idea I subscribe to about the idea of a more perfect union. That sure, we were founded by people. Humans are the ones who founded this country, and humans are inherently flawed. And that's why they put in there that not that we are perfect at any point, but towards a more perfect union, which is, I believe, something that the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, mentioned today as part of us achieving that here. So I guess you got issues with the country and the way it's come about here, but I just got to say this, that even though there have been plenty of issues over the years and specific things that can be identified, the forward movement of the progress and the way that it is then being secured to ours and our afterbears is one of the more important ways that America has progressed overall here. And to say that it has all been the side of one party or another, it does not borne out by history. I just got to say there. Anyway, getting back to more phone calls in the line here. Again, the number to call, 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. We do have Barbara on the west side here with us right now. Barbara, thanks for joining us.
Wow. What can I say about Raul? I had not heard anything about the birther movement as a reason for voting against or opposing the new Supreme Court justice. But hey, we're all entitled to an opinion. And regarding Abbott and Psaki making the comment today that what authority does he have to be transporting these illegal immigrants across state lines? Well, probably the same authority he has that Mayorkas has to move airplane loads of illegal immigrants across the United States. So, anyway. But actually, I was calling about, yesterday I called in regarding ethics waivers that some of the Biden administration employees have received, and especially in the DHS. Well, today I found out that there's several in the Biden administration that were former unionizers, and they lobbied the government on behalf of the unions. And one of them in particular has a waiver which states that she can continue to communicate with her former employer, but now she's sitting at the opposite side of the table. She's sitting with the government against her employer, which was the opposite before. And we all know what the teachers' union's role was and their relationship with the CDC and the federal government in crafting the mandate on the school closures and the masks. So there's a lot of unionization there. And the Wall Street Journal was reporting that the Biden administration is planning on making changes to a 28-year-old program, which is provides $440 million grant to the I forgot the schools, charter schools. And so what they're requiring now, the charter schools, and this is to, I think, discourage them and enough not to even apply for a charter. They're requiring that the charter schools now, when you apply for it, that you demonstrate the need for charter school. You have to prove that the public schools lack capacity for the students, and that by allowing that charter, they will not exceed the number of public schools in the area. They're also requesting charter schools to submit their curriculum to the teachers' unions for approval. Well, that's one of the reasons why we have charter schools, is not to be associated with the teachers' unions. And they've got to meet quotas. Basically, they want them to practice affirmative action. It's students and the professionals in the charter schools, so they're asking for that. And they want an example of of everybody that's going to be in a school, and all that has to be submitted and coordinated with the unions. So this is just another attempt of the Biden administration to break a system that is working. There isn't any reason to do this other than to discourage charter schools to please the unions. We saw what he said to Amazon today, we're coming after you.
Mm-hmm.
So this administration, and I'm sure I'm going to find some ethics waivers in there for union officials, which I did find, and secret ethics waivers. That's going to be interesting when they divulge all that information to us. So, I mean, we have things that are working for the American people, for parents, for the students, but now the parents are listed as terrorists, and Merrick Garland is going to be keeping an eye on them. And now we have this on charter schools, a broken program by the administration that didn't have to be broken, just like our border policies, just like our wall. We didn't have immigration policies. There was no reason for them to put us in such precarious situations here on the border. And the drugs flowing in. You saw 548 pounds of liquid meth were seized here on the border just yesterday. How many? This administration amazes me every day because they don't do something that we can get up feeling good about ourselves in the morning. Let's see what, at least with President Trump, we had things that we would get up and rejoice in, be happy. Unlike Raul, I believe our country has been a fantastic country, and we've had great administrations in there who did great things for our country. Unfortunately, this is one that hasn't. And it's, hey, consequences for our vote, right? That's what they say. And unfortunately, that's what we're suffering through, I feel, with this administration. So we just have to wait it out.
I mean, I think a lot of people I know that ended up voting for this current administration were along the lines of kind of holding their nose in severe opposition to the previous one. And a line I heard oft repeated in social media is, and will hold it accountable, the administration and the current president here. And I'm kind of waiting for that last part as well from a lot of these people saying that, well, we still got to keep supporting it, hope they do right. But even if they're doing things that are objectively against their own interests, like if you want to talk about my generation and the people in my same age group, one thing that happened this past week was the further just extension of the hiatus on student loan payments. It's a pretty big issue for a lot of people, particularly went to college with, but even just in my age group. And the full expectation is at this point is that will just be kind of a piecemeal extended right up until the midterms go through. And I mean, you can already see the script being written of we lost the house here, guys, so we can't do anything about this. But boy, you better vote for us next time so that we can pass it then, which we totally will. And completely ignoring the fact that they had control of all three branches if they really were serious about it. So, again, I think that's at least part of the problem that we're looking at for national Democrats in terms of holding on to power going forward here. So, I mean, there's a lot more to get into here. And then, the whole meth at the border. I think that was a little bit earlier this week, actually, but getting more widely reported yesterday because, it was in a gas tank. And the buckets that were then used to extract it from the gas tank. I mean, that has literally killed people, I want to say, in our sector of the border, if not nearby, when someone who was trying to bring across a bottle of it themselves were told to take a sip by border officials to say, prove it's a liquid and not something you're trying to smuggle, and did so. And within short order was no longer among the living because that stuff, you think meth is bad, liquid meth is literally concentrated, but that's a whole nother subject here. So appreciate the point in the call. You have a good one here. More we got to get to here, but we got to take that next break right now. So coming out of the next break, we'll get to more of the comments, more of the calls, more of the discussion about the issues that affect us here in the borderland as we do. So just a reminder, that number to call, 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
I-10 eastbound at Yarborough, right lane is blocked by a fire truck. Stay left there. Loop 375 southbound from Zaragoza to Padres. Slow traffic, heavy congestion, and 5-minute delays. I-10 westbound between Wrestler and Thorne, you got 5-minute delays. And there's an accident reported Pebble Hills Boulevard east of Rich Beam at John Hayes. Starting to see some slowing in that area. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by the maker of Frontline Plus.
Frontline Plus is the #1 name in flea and tick protection. So however you want to live life with your pets, Frontline Plus lets you take them everywhere, no matter how you define it. Available for dogs or cats. Visit frontline.com to learn more.
Maybe you've had to put off a health appointment or two during the COVID-19 pandemic, but if you're 45 or older, there's one test you shouldn't put off any longer. That's your regular screening for colorectal cancer. Colorectal cancer is the leading cancer killer, but can be prevented with regular screenings starting at age 45. There are more screening options than ever before, including at-home tests. It takes guts to put your health first. Ask your doctor about your options today and visit cdc.gov/screenforlife for more information.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. Its powerful technology actively finds and invites qualified candidates to apply to your job. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
Research shows that people remember radio ads with a booming voice that emphasizes all the main points. So to help you remember that Liberty Mutual Insurance Company customizes your home insurance so you only pay for what you need.
That part is super important.
Here's one with a booming voice.
I'm emphasizing everything.
Liberty Mutual customizes your home insurance.
Like a page with every word highlighted.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty. Liberty, 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 liberty.
Dad, this is fun. I didn't think I liked kayaking.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, but I think it's time to head back in.
Okay. Can we come back?
Sure. Hey, be careful getting out of the boat.
It's a kayak, Dad.
I'm going to return the kayak.
Can we walk home?
How about a taxi?
It's a short fare from your neighborhood to your naturehood. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a neighborhood park or green space near you. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the U.S. Forest Service.
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an extreme flash flood.
Disasters don't plan ahead, but you can. Talk to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. A lot of ways to get involved with the show with all of the very many subjects we get into here. Oh boy, it's been quite the day and will continue to be so. I am sure we have those phone lines open, full up at the moment, but if you want to try to call in, 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. A lot of response, a lot of commentary going on online as well, because we take those comments over on our social media pages, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. A lot of comments going on there. And one actually other thing that came to mind here about the idea of, as Barbara was bringing up, quotas and such for, well, administration, population of charter schools here. It's a state example, but comes to mind in relation to this that the judge that tossed out a California law mandating diversity quotas on boards, according to the California Globe headline there, one you may have heard of, according to some lawsuits with it was Assembly Bill 979 over there in California, requiring certain makeups of boards of major companies, as that being thrown out as being ruling it unconstitutional, suggests that it was so obviously unconstitutional it didn't even merit a trial, according to their subheadline there. So comes to mind, though, again, federal would be a slightly different situation, but as was also mentioned, this is why elections matter. But let's get back to those phone lines now. Right now we do have Andrew on the west side here with us. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. I'd like to talk about the job market here in El Paso.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. One of the things that I think young people should consider when they take a job, especially in the El Paso market, is does the job offer health insurance?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think a lot of young people these days overlook that. Also, the fact that we have a lot of U.S. citizens residing across the border because housing and rent is cheaper over there. Have you noticed that?
I've noticed the first part here, though. I guess maybe I'm weird in that way that I definitely always consider the health insurance. I mean, that's something very much top of mind for me, but maybe that's just a sign of my age. Don't know many people personally who choose to live in Juarez for that, but I'm not surprised that that's the case for, well, rental reasons, and as has been of late, well, gas prices, among other things.
Yes, that's true. And yes, you are correct. If what you said before, the average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in El Paso is about $850 to $900 a month.
Yep, and so that's why we're seeing, again, it was towards the start of this year, I want to say maybe even end of last year, we were looking at that being just the total median rent. So we're talking about houses to the tiniest little shoebox apartment you can get, that median being about that, approaching approximately $1,000 here, which is serious change for the way El Paso usually deals with it.
Yes, as a matter of fact, a friend of mine who is on Social Security was just telling me the rent in his one-bedroom apartment went up $100 a month. He just had to, sign a new contract, and of course he had to take a part-time job, something to be in compliance with his Social Security also.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm not surprised that that kind of situation is happening, and probably see more of it before. I mean, we've already heard stories of people that had been on fixed incomes in this area having to move out of it already. Even though El Paso is often touted as a not that expensive place to live, it still puts it out of the means of some people. And as it continues to increase, I'm sure that will continue.
Yes, and last but not least, just to comment on something that Raul said. He talked about Biden saying that this nomination was an example of diversity in this country, correct? The confirmation of Ketanji Brown.
I mean, not even just Raul, but a lot of, Democrats nationally and the president, Senate Majority Leader, et cetera, all very much touting that as part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I do recall Biden saying that just recently, or today rather. And just to let people out there know, and Raul know, as I recall, Biden was one of the senators that was a nay vote on the confirmation of Clarence Thomas. Also, our last Republican senator in this state, who was Lloyd Benson.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So much for diversity on the part of Biden. As a matter of fact, he was a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and really, laid it into Clarence Thomas back then. I do remember those confirmation hearings.
Yeah, a little bit before my time, but having seen some of the tape on it, shall we say, yeah, they got a little bit heated in their own right, though we have pretty well surpassed that in the modern era, it does appear, in terms of heated questioning in confirmation hearings.
Yes, sir. Anyway, thank you for allowing me to speak, and you have a good afternoon.
Yeah, sure thing. You too as well. Appreciate the points on the call. You have a good one there. I mean, there's a lot to get into on this here. Again, I have no doubt that there is a very qualified, and that Ketanji Brown Brown Jackson has their own qualifications. But even then, I mean, the politics were evident in all of this. There's very, very little that goes on at the national level that the politics and the political ramifications are not baked into, and this one just happens to be one of the more obvious ones. Among other things, there has been a lot of consternation on the part of black activists and people involved in those issues in this country. We're expecting more from this administration, and it does seem that this is something that they felt had to be done in order to placate that kind of a voter base for themselves here. So we want to just go along that. That's one of the impacts coming from here. A lot more comments coming in online. Barbara Carrasco, Maria Kalman, saying about, among other things, that Biden promised good-paying union jobs, not private sector jobs, and then making some allusions to other notable or infamous, I guess I should say, people around the world here. RJ also saying a world is coming to America for the best opportunities and not the other way around here. And James Ratcliffe saying, among other things, that, we're building more of the wall using Texas money, and I hope the federal government has given the bill for that since it was promised by the legislature, even if they forgot about it. So a lot more commentary on all the things we're talking about here today. We'll have to get to more after this next break, just trying to get back on the clock here because we're blowing it up as it is. So we got more calls coming up, and we'll get to those in short order. If you want to call in yourself, the number to do so, 915-544-5876, 544 KTSM. Back after this quick break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hey everyone, it's your KFOX 14 News Update. I'm Robert Olguin. El Paso Congresswoman Veronica Escobar is celebrating the appointment of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. Today, the Senate voted 53-47 to confirm President Biden's pick to the Supreme Court. Escobar released a statement saying that Jackson is a talented and brilliant jurist who will make an excellent addition to the Supreme Court. The El Paso Museum of History has been named as one of 30 finalists for the 2022 National Medal for Museum and Library Service. The El Paso Museum of History is one of 2 institutions in Texas to be selected as a finalist for that award. According to the city, the National Medal is the nation's highest honor given to museums and libraries that demonstrate a significant impact on their communities. This has been your KFOX 14 News Update. I'm Robert Olguin.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
I-10 eastbound at Yarborough, right lane is blocked by a fire truck. Stay left there. Loop 375 southbound from Zaragoza to Padres. Slow traffic, heavy congestion, and 5-minute delays. I-10 westbound between Wrestler and Thorne, you got 5-minute delays. And there's an accident reported Pebble Hills Boulevard east of Rich Beam at John Hayes. Starting to see some slowing in that area. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
In Severe Weather Center, this is Chief Meteorologist Sandra Diaz. Well, we had our cold front come through in the morning, and that left us with a cooler day, but now it leaves us with another cool night. But the winds should be much nicer tonight. So overnight temperatures will drop into the lower to mid 40s. We are looking at a gorgeous day on Friday with temperature highs much closer to normal in the mid to upper 70s. This weekend, though, we will see bigger changes with increasing winds as well as increasing temperatures.
This report is sponsored by Indeed.com. If your company needs to spring into efficient hiring, then check out Indeed. Their powerful hiring platform makes it easy to attract, interview, and hire candidates. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
iHeartRadio Earth is here with little tips for a healthier planet. This spring, you can share your own observations about nature with scientists and play a critical role in scientific discovery by adding to their data collection. Discover more about citizen science programs such as monitoring weather, observing plants and animals, and more. Brought to you by iHeartRadio Earth and the National Environmental Education Foundation. To find more tips for smarter, sustainable living or to take action in your own community, go to iHeartRadio.com/earth.
The El Paso History Show with Andrew J. Polk is 10 a.m. this Saturday about San Elizario and El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro that runs through El Paso. The El Paso History Show is sponsored by Patrick Tuttle Coldwell Banker Heritage Real Estate, Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant in Cañutillo, Mission Del Rey Southwest for gifts and decor, and by M1EP Management Corporation, Saturday morning at 10 a.m. on News Radio 690 and streaming live on Facebook and YouTube.
Before your day is done, Brakemasters has already helped thousands of people get back to their families safely. Get your vehicle in Brakemasters shape. Download coupons at Brakemasters.com. Only then can you say your day is done.
Brakemasters. We give you an honest break.
This report is sponsored by Brakemasters.
I am a veteran. I spent 2 years alone and homeless.
As America's veterans face challenges, DAV is there.
My victory was finding the support to get back on my feet.
DAV helps veterans of every generation get the benefits they've earned.
I'm a veteran. When I got out, I felt like nowhere was safe.
So veterans can reach victories, great and small.
My victory was finding the help I needed. Thanks to DAV, now I feel like I'm human again.
Support more victories for veterans. Go to DAV.org.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social pages we're up on these days: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Talk El Paso or Andrew J. Polk is the name to find us on under most of those. But we also got calls we'll be getting to. Again, the number to call there, 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. A lot of commentary about the things affecting us in the borderland. Maria Coleman saying, out-of-state investors and companies buying for the feds, driving up prices. Price is no object for them, resulting in higher prices while increasing property taxes. Even if your home is paid off, taxes still exist, pushing out locals and fixed-income residents. I mean, the whole conversation about BlackRock, other major asset holders. Again, the companies that have been contacting me personally have been numerous and varied and very generic in name when I have thought to ask, because usually for a while there, I was just hanging up before I realized I really need to be asking and finding out what the hell is going on here. So when I did, very just super generic names. But in any case, yeah, and also impacts of inflation in the area, more dollars chasing the same amount of goods here. Those impacts absolutely continue. So we'll be looking at this for a while here, but to a previous comment, Barbara Carrasco saying that Republicans were successful in keeping the $2 billion for border security in the omnibus bill. Perhaps the new administration will reimburse Texas a portion of the border wall construction with those monies. We'll see what happens. I mean, again, this is why elections matter, but let's go back to those phone lines right now. Again, the number to call, 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. We do have Harry on the east side here with us right now. Harry, thanks for joining us.
Hey, good afternoon, El Paso. A good day to be 6 feet above.
Absolutely.
I want to comment. Raul, Barbara, and Andrew are making all great comments, all great arguments, whether you agree or not. They're intelligently put together. I've got two local issues I want to hit you with. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't going to make a comment on the Supreme Court until open line free-for-all Friday, but I probably will preface that at the after the local here.
Fair enough.
I went into Albertsons the other day, Andrew, to buy a newspaper. I was looking, it looked impressive, the headlines, the front page, and things I would be interested in. And I asked the girl how much was a newspaper. There was no price on it. And she ran it through the ticker, and she says $3.49. And I'm thinking, El Paso Times is a great newspaper. It really is. And in its heyday, I would have compared that to a lot of the major newspapers. But boy, have we lost our way on that with the local news and detail and everything you would really want to know. Everything we talk about here would actually be covered in the El Paso Times to some degree or another. But no longer can you get up in the morning, Andrew, and drink your cup of coffee and read your El Paso Times. And that I find that to be a sad issue myself.
I'll tend to agree with you on there. I mean, I don't like casting dispersion on other outlets. We have some of our own partnerships here, but I mean, part of the reason that we do the show and the way we do it and the focus that we have is on the basis of, well, online conversations don't really fill the gap in terms of people being informed, aware, discussing the local issues. But I have to freely admit here that some of the absolute number of declining pages in local periodicals was absolutely a factor in making the show possible, because I saw that as not a good thing for our region here. So again, I know plenty of people who work and have worked at the Times and have nothing but good things to say about them and what they do and the important work that is. But you're onto a point there, I will freely admit.
You know, I'll just add one more thing with that before I go on to my next thing. The newspapers had to be responsible for what they printed, okay? And my son, I've had different people telling me, well, why have the newspaper? I can go online and get all the news. I got news for you. Mm-hmm. Everything on the internet is not true. There's people that can go on there and say anything.
Oh, boy, yeah.
And you have people, all they're doing is reading that. They're being ill-informed. I'm sorry. It's just not true. Bring back the newspapers so we can all get a little bit smarter. And but anyway, my second comment, the bicycle lanes in El Paso. Mm-hmm. You have to want to commit suicide to get on a bicycle and get in one of these bicycle lanes. And I'm speaking primarily from the east side of town. I can't comment on the west. But there's nobody that I have seen in the 6 years I've been back in town that was brave enough to get on a bicycle in this so-called lane and ride. The drivers don't have any respect for them to begin with, and it's crazy. They're using those bicycle lanes for their turns. They get in there where you have 2 lanes roads, they make a third line out of it. And I'm thinking, who would be silly enough to ride a bicycle into those conditions?
I mean, you're not too off the point on the idea of taking your life in your hands doing it. I mean, Well, if you want to be very specific about it, what occurred to me here is that, not to make a political point about it, but it was actually the father of O'Rourke, of Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke, was killed while in a bike and going into a bike lane here. So, I mean, it's a serious issue in our area, and so I can't comment on the east side as much, but I actually had a coworker back in my TV days who said, I live about a mile and a half away from our station here. Why don't I ride a bike? It'll save me money, and, I'll eliminate part of my workout here. And they tried doing it, and they promptly returned to their car because, it was harrowing at best. So we have seen issues with even notable local people being, unfortunately, removed from this sphere of existence because of this. So it is serious, though. There are some better suggestions than not here. I mean, there's the whole concept of, well, why have bike lanes? No one ride bikes. But then there's also the counter argument of, no one rides bikes because the bike lanes were going to get you hurt at best. But beyond that, there are some better suggestions. I just the other day was seeing this out of California, because of course it would be idea for a bike lane that was essentially, it was a 2-lane road where the one lane was essentially split between the sides. And so 2-way traffic is supposed to go down the center lane, and until they encounter a car coming in the opposite direction, then they're supposed to go over to the sides and otherwise leave that for bikes here. So there are good suggestions and there are bad suggestions, and that one come up to me as a very bad suggestion, but would like to see more investment in reasonableness and turn it into what we can in this way. Just don't use that kind of paint on the roads that then disintegrates after like 3 years, like we have been seeing.
Yeah, bicycle sporting is a big thing. In Colorado, they had regular parks and areas where for bicyclists. And when they rode bicycles, they'd stop traffic when they had different tours and different bicycling procedures. And that would have probably been the safe way to do it. Anyway, I want to preface my final comment so people can relax on the Supreme Court nomination. There's nothing wrong with having Kagan, Sotomayor, Jackson, and Comey Barrett. Now you've got 4 ladies on the court. One is conservative, the 3 are liberal. And if you want to talk about qualifications, Jackson is probably somewhere in the middle. But the only thing you got to be concerned about here is she is a liberal and she's replacing a liberal. That's all that's taking place here. That's all that's happening. And as far as the least qualified person on the court, that would have been Bush's nomination of Kagan. I mean, so if you want to talk about ineptness and qualifications, you could probably start with that on the court.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get more into that here. Again, it's going to be a while before the actual confirmation goes through, or the swearing in, I guess I should say, is the correct way to refer to this, as we got to get through this current term of office, or term of the court is, again, the correct way to say that. So we got a little ways to go, and I'm sure this will pop back up again, but this has come through just in the analysis as one of the fastest confirmation processes in history, which is, again, given the contentious nature of some previous or even just recent ones, a little bit surprising, but I'm sure we'll have another thing to fight on that level before too long. Let's see what next week brings.
Well, have a good evening, and say hello to everybody for me.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for the point in the call. You have a good one there, too. All right, we'll squeeze in one more quick call before we hit that next break here. We have Ben on the east side here with us right now. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, a real quick comment on what your last caller said. Ted Cruz has a book out, says One Vote Away, and it's only one vote that it can make a historical difference in the way our country goes.
True.
The other thing I'd like to ask you is 2 things. CBRE, CBRE and Redfin. I looked it up, and 9.6% owned by BlackRock of CBRE, and BlackRock owns 6.9% of Redfin. Okay, that was upsetting. What my main comment is, did anybody see Joe Biden at the reception over at the White House for Barack Obama?
Yeah, I think there's probably one picture in particular that stood out to me that you might be referencing here, showing a lot of attention on the former president and some apparent, at least from the angle of this picture, straining for attention by the current president. It kind of seemed like.
That was the saddest thing I've ever seen for a president. The old man was sitting and wandering around looking for people to talk to. Nobody would talk to him. He looked like he was confused. He may not have known where he was. He put his hand on Barack and called out his name, and he didn't. And Barack just ignored him. His vice president was sitting there talking with Barack, ignored Biden completely. That was the saddest thing. I have no love for Joe Biden and what he's done for this country, but that was an old man that was thoroughly shunned by his own party and by the people that put him in the position that he's in now, where he has no ability to do things for the free world and our country. It's awful. And I literally had tears coming down my eyes.
Yeah, it wasn't a great picture. I'll agree with you there. I don't like doing the armchair diagnosing because I have no qualifications to do so. But let's just say, I've been saying for a long time now that my full expectation of this administration was going to be a warmed over set of Obama-era policies, as it was, given both the staffing and the policies that have actually come out here, or the lack thereof. So I guess I wasn't surprised at the reception the way it did, though it could have been a little less obvious here. But again, it just not perfectly surprised, I have to admit.
And nothing was shown on any of the other stations, CNN, MSNBC, anybody. The only place I saw it was on Tucker Carlson and some of the Fox stations. It is, it was awful. It was just awful. One other real quick thing. El Paso only has $719.7 million of assets available to pay bills, totaling $1.7 billion. That means that El Paso has a financial hole of $977.5 million. We are essentially in the same situation that the country's in. We're in a financial hole that's almost impossible to dig out. The only thing that we don't have is a printing press where we can just print the money and take care of it.
Yeah, again, questions of governance are very paramount here. And it's just a reminder, actually, we got 4 seats coming up for city council election here in November here. I don't have the numbers. Let me come back after this break and give you those city council seats and where they are, because the way we consider our debt and the load here in El Paso and the impact that it might have on all things like taxes, very important, something we'll definitely be getting into here. So thanks for the point in the call. Do appreciate it. You have a good one there. We got to take that next break right now. Coming out of the break, close out the show, set up for Free for All Friday, and all the good stuff that comes with that. So stay tuned. More Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Don't go anywhere.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
I-10 eastbound, an injury accident downtown at exit 19 Prospect Street. Watch for slowing there. On the I-10 eastbound at Yarborough, that right lane there is blocked by a fire truck. I-10 westbound between Wrestler and Thorne, you got slow and go traffic with 5-minute delays. Another crash reported Zaragoza northbound at the border highway. Congestion and delays in that area. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by Staples Stores. Staples Print and Marketing Services help small business print big with wide format signs and banners. Right now, get $10 off custom printed signs, banners, and posters when you spend $50 or more. Offer ends 5/28. Visit staples.com/signage for details. This is your sign to print big at Staples.
Hi, Phil Swift here for the Flex Seal family of products. You know, there's a lot of ways to protect your home. You could dig a moat. You could bubble wrap it. Or you could train a pack of wolves to protect it. But the best way is with the Flex Seal family of products. So when you need to patch, bond, seal, repair, and stop leaks fast, get the Flex Seal family of products. Available at flexsealproducts.com and fine retailers.
There's something for everyone on Discovery Plus. the streaming home of ghostly freakouts, muscle car spinouts, and 90-day makeouts.
I'm really in love with her.
Start your free trial today for exclusive originals and a huge collection of favorites.
Whoa!
Then dive into Nature Docs, geek out with the family, and get your grub on. I get into this every day. The streaming home of true crime, paranormal, food, home, nature, romance, plus so much more. Discovery Plus. Start your free trial. Terms apply.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. Its powerful technology actively finds and invites qualified candidates to apply to your job. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
Research shows that people remember radio ads with a booming voice that emphasizes all the main points. So to help you remember that Liberty Mutual Insurance Company customizes your home insurance so you only pay for what you need.
That part is super important.
Here's one with a booming voice.
I'm emphasizing everything.
Liberty Mutual customizes your home insurance.
Like a page with every word highlighted.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso. I've been your host, Andrew J. Polk, rounding the bend on the last little bit of the show here for this week. Though, of course, we got more to come for you. Of course, we're setting up Free for All Friday to come shortly, and we'll get some of the calls, comments. If you want to leave us a comment or question ahead of that, you can do so through the pound 250 system. Pound 250 is the number you dial, and then with all 4 of those symbols, and then you say the keyword Talk El Paso when prompted. At least one come through that may have been at least a little bit unclear on the concept here, but we'll delve into that because during that whole show, we take all of your comments and calls throughout both hours. Just keep it clean if you're doing anything with audio here. We'll have to defer any we had on the left for today here for tomorrow. I think they'll work out that way anyway, a little bit more of the open topic here. So again, that's one way to do it. And again, I promise coming back mentioning who is going to be on the ballot coming up in November, at least on the city side of things. We're looking at City Council Representative District 1, currently held by Peter Sparsbein. City Representative District 5, currently held by Isabel Salcido. District 6, Claudia Lizette Rodriguez, and District 8, which is Cissy Lizarraga. So a lot of stuff that's going to be on that November ballot. So as we're talking about these issues, just keep that in mind. All I'm saying here. And so a lot of people have commented over on these and the other issues about high local debt and things like that, and the control of some of our media and or the people who own the things that own them. RJ saying that BlackRock and Vanguard control about $20 trillion in assets. I know that for BlackRock, it's about 10 to 11 trillion. So not as familiar with Vanguard's holdings, but sounds about in the right order of magnitude here. So we'll get into more of this and more as we get to the end of the show. RJ saying Miller time. Just keep it safe out there and be sure not to drink and drive out there. Want to keep you safe to be on for the next show, as we want everyone to do so. That's going to do it here for us today. Everyone out there, we appreciate your time spent with us here today. You all really are help make this show what it is. So stay safe out there, particularly you, RJ. Look twice for motorcycles if out on the road, and don't be drinking. And we'll see you all tomorrow for Free for All Friday. Have a good one. See you all then.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
I-10 eastbound at exit 19 got an injury accident, and it's slowing traffic, blocking the right lane. I-10 eastbound at Prospect Street near exit 19 downtown. Watch for slowing there. Zaragoza northbound at Americas Avenue. An accident reported. Lots of congestion and delays in that area around Border Highway. And fire and police are showing up at a new crash, Montana Avenue, just west of Yarborough Global Reach. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
He's one of America's most controversial billionaires, George Soros. All across America, Soros is funding far-left district attorneys for office. And once elected, these district attorneys oppose bail. They want early release for criminals. And in some cases, they won't even prosecute felony offenders. It's no wonder crime is spiking in major cities, and our police are under fire. Now, Rob Schmidt looks at the shocking situation on Newsmax. Tune into Newsmax and watch Rob Schmidt tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. and find out the real truth about George Soros and the dangerous district attorneys endangering our cities. You can find Newsmax on every major cable system. If your cable operator doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, let them know you want it, or watch Newsmax free on your